Hello and welcome back to the show. So I have a really special guest joining us here today, Jens Nielsen, who is a business consultant and coach who started out as one of the most successful real estate investors in this country and really all around the world as well. So Jens started out as a real estate investor. Now he actually coaches real estate agents, teams, entrepreneurs, anybody who has their own business, who's running their own thing, to actually run a business where they can build a cohesive team and remove themselves as a constraint to their business and be able to actually scale their business long term. So if you guys are in a position now where you're successful in real estate, you're doing a lot of sales yourself, and you're ready to get into building a team, getting ready to scale up your sales business, then this is going to be a great episode for you. So Jens, welcome to the show, man. Thanks
Hey,
so much for
thanks.
joining us.
Thanks, Kobe. I appreciate it. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Absolutely. So before we get started, we'd love to have an opportunity for you to share a little bit about yourself and how did you get started? Obviously you started in investing, and then what made you make the switch to business consulting that you're doing today?
Yeah, well, I didn't actually start in investing. I started in W-2, right? I mean, as people, if I'm in my mid 50s, and I had a long IT career. I immigrated from Denmark 30 years ago. So in 1996, I came to the US, started out in the East Coast, and did the typical path, right? Went to school, got my undergrad, my graduate degree in computer science, and then worked for all kinds of different companies in my career. But in my mid 40s, roughly 10 years ago, I decided that something had to change. I did not want to spend the next 20, 30 years working for somebody else because, like, man, that's too long. So I decided to make a shift. And the shift at that time was I didn't want to go out and like start at that time like a brand new business from scratch. So I was like, oh, real estate investing is actually something you can slowly or quickly scale, and that seemed like that was a great way to disconnect my time from my income. And I think that's the key mindset for anybody who's building a business. Make sure you don't that the business doesn't rely on you doing all the work. So start separating that, and that's what commercial real estate did for me, investing and so on. So we started 10 years ago by buying small properties in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and then that scaled up and so on. So that's a little bit about, me in a few minutes here.
Yeah, for sure, man. So what made you jump into now what you're doing now with consulting other businesses? So you're successful investing in real estate. You've built up quite a substantial portfolio. What was it that really made you kind of pursue this new thing that you're doing now where you're helping other agents, you're helping other business owners?
Yeah, I think it comes from always having a desire to give back and teach. Right? I think as we get older, and luckily you're not there yet, but as we get older, we there is that desire of start sharing the knowledge that we have learned, right? And I've been married for many years. I don't have kids, so there isn't kids to teach, right? So that idea of sharing with others has always been a passion of mine, but I never was attracted to, being a teacher or a college professor because that's just low income and hard work. So it's like, oh, let me start like using everything we've learned, right? And we have scaled. I mean, we had at some point over 2,500 unit apartment buildings. Sorry, 2,500 units, apartment units, right? So we scaled that. That taught me so much about building teams and systems and businesses. Like, wow, I've learned so much. Let's let that not go to waste. Let me start helping others to be more successful. And it's more like Kobe, it's more like a giving back. It's more like something that's really passionate about, right? Because real estate doesn't take all day for me. That's a few hours a week. So I want to do something that feels meaningful and helpful and collectively, uh, helps the collective good, I guess, right?
Right, exactly. It's more of something that you want to do as far as a passion, right? Like you've had and you've accumulated all this knowledge from building your portfolio and your commercial real estate business that you feel like you can do a lot of good for other business owners or people starting out.
Yeah, yeah. Basically, and from my IT world, I always love to optimize systems because, hey, you buy a server, well, it can be run crappy or it can run well, depending on how well it's optimized. Same thing with a human being, and have been an athlete my whole life too. You can be a crappy athlete, or you can be a good one. if you have the right training, the right mindset, the right nutrition, well, and all these things, right? And humans, the same thing, right? If we know how to operate, if we have the right mindset, the right systems, the right um, guidance, we can operate at such a higher level. And that's really fascinating to me what's possible, right?
Yes, and I think that's a good point to bring up as well, which is there's a lot of real estate agents out there who are, today who are maybe struggling, right, in their business, who are not performing at the optimal level. So I mean, you obviously you coach other real estate agents, teams as well. So what are some of the things that you're seeing now if, somebody's coming up to you, right, and maybe they are a real estate agent, they're in this specific space. What are some of the things that you're seeing that they're doing that is holding them back from not performing at an optimal level?
Yeah. So I think what I've observed, right, is the 80-20 rule, right? 20% of the agents do 80% of the work or sales and so on, right? The struggling 20% are the ones who have never made it important enough to be successful. And what I mean by that, I mean that maybe they're doing it as a side hustle. It's like, oh, I'm working, but I'm going to try to sell homes on the weekends and the evenings. They've not made it important enough. They're not like do or die. It's like, yeah, it'd be nice. Well, to be successful in anything in this world, it can't just be nice. It has to be a 100% necessity. So I think that's the struggling, but this is not important enough. There's not enough necessity. There's not enough quote unquote pain. And that's great. That's not really my focus area. I like to work with the ones that are like, holy smokes, they have so much business. They've figured out the sales and everything else, but now they have a huge problem because they're working, evenings and nights and weekends and 60, 70, 80 hours. Maybe they make a lot of money, but they don't take care of themselves. They're not physically healthy. Their relationships sucks. They are just unhappy. And what they do is they just chase the next deal, the next client. Those are the ones I want to help because they've been a victim of their own success, right? Getting them back to being healthy, to create boundaries, to offload stuff they shouldn't be doing. That's really where my focus is, right?
Yes, and then that I think that's very important for a lot of people who are in that position where they are successful because from the outside looking in, the first type of agent that you've just talked about, obviously there's things that they need to do or mindset shifts that they need to make in order to actually hit what's, at least by the public considered successful, right? In the real estate industry or in the business or any business that is. But for somebody who is already successful, who's making a lot of sales, right? They are, possibly struggling with a lot of different things, but they're not seeing it. Maybe the people around them are not telling them. So for somebody who is like that, are you seeing that maybe they're not, maybe not even noticing that they have these issues and you almost have to kind of help them figure it out as in conversations?
Yeah, I mean, you know, there has to be people have some sort of idea that there is a problem, right? Because but they can't really figure out what it is, right? It's like, okay, there's something doesn't feel right. I mean, I'm making all kinds of money, I'm driving fancy cars and living in nice houses, but something is amiss, something doesn't work. And quite often those really successful agents, they're so assured in their own success that they even hesitate to reach out to a coach or a consultant because they're like, I got this shit figured out. I know what to do, right? So there is coming from the outside, right? You need to start, for me, I need to start probing a little bit, right? It's like, oh, so and so seem like you're doing well, but what cost does this have? It's like, oh, I never get to go to the gym, or my kids hate me, or whatever it is, right? So you start probing at not that the businesses seem to be figured out, but you start probing at those things on the outside that is a pain point for them and said, oh, wouldn't it be nice if you could take every weekend off or travel more, hang out with your kids more? And when they start seeing this, they're like, wow, I have a problem here. Help me fix it, right? But you got to probe at those, not the internal problem, but the external problems, right? Sorry, not the lifestyle cost it has, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because, as an agent, you're always kind of going out there, finding your next deal, right? It's a business where you are a lot of times reliant on yourself. And if you're not working, if you're taking yourself away from the business, deals are not closing and deals are not closing, you're not hitting your income goals, you're not hitting your, your production that, your lifestyle that you need to kind of maintain. Right. So when you meet with agents who are maybe already operating as just, an individual, what are some of the things that you want to help them with? What are some of the things that you kind of help them as far as figuring out how do I step away from what I'm doing now? How can I possibly set up systems where my income as an agent is not reliant on the time that I trade every single day?
Yeah, I mean that is a challenge, right? Because as you said, you got to be out there and listing and selling and so on, right? So a couple of things that we think about is, are you doing the deals that's going to make you the most amount of money, right? Are you chasing every, low end deal that makes you a few $1,000s here and there that prevents you from taking on the larger ones? So there is let's focus, let's make sure you operate in the right space and focus your time on the stuff that's going to make you income. I had one client, he was like, "Yeah, I'm doing these like investor fix and flip." I was like, "All right, how much do you make?" "Oh, $2,000." I was like, $2,000. So how many hours worth of work, right? And he's like, "Oh yeah, that doesn't make any sense." Like, no, you gotta get that off your plate, right? And so on. So you start getting that. So that's one. That's a production. That's a focus on the thing that's going to make you the most amount of money. And then the other thing is what I've seen are when people start actually creating teams that you can start offloading some of that. Maybe, you have a rotating schedule, so you're not on call every weekend, right? So a team can help with that. Or you can actually hire, your TC, your transaction coordinator, because you have multiple people. You can actually hire that assistant and so on. Then you can start offloading some of that tedious work there, right? So Teams has been, I think, is a successful way, a great way for successful agents to band together and actually create a stronger brand, sharing the work and so on, right? That's been my experience.
Yeah, so being able to build a team, right? Being able to work together with other agents, I think that's a natural progression for a lot of real estate agents. And one of the things that we've seen, at least from my perspective, working with certain agents, is that they struggle, especially if they're very successful, right? So the most successful individual agents are the ones that actually struggle the most to become a team leader or to build a team. So my question to you is, first of all, have you seen, the same patterns with some of the agents that you're working with? And secondly, what are some of the things that you could do as a high performing individual to then transfer those skills into becoming a high performing business owner, right?
You're absolutely right. It's being the solo entrepreneur versus being a business owner, right? And that is a mindset shift, but it's a scaling problem. So, yeah, it is not. People struggle with that, right? People struggle with that because most agents, the successful ones, tend to be super type A personalities, right? They want stuff done their way and all the time and so on. Um, so until they start discovering the cost of that, right? When they get a little bit older, it's like, oh, I want to actually like maybe train up the next agent. So that's where the pain start coming in, and they may see the light. But what happens is, the experience I have is that they need to start stepping away from the day to day and start trusting their team. And that's easier said than done. But how you trust your team is by putting the right people in the right seats with the right accountability, with the right processes, and so on, right? So now we're coming into traditional business building, building a business that has all the components in place and does not rely on individuals' daily strength. It basically relies on the systems and more processes, right? So a team I'm working with, there are three individuals that came together. They're not like there's a lead. It's just three of them working together to share marketing and everything else. So they have to be very clear on who does what, who takes care of certain responsibilities. But once they have that clear, they're like, oh, now I don't have to worry about marketing anymore because so and so is going to do it. I don't have to worry about the open houses because that person's going to do it. And suddenly it just starts freeing up that time, right? But it's coming together, having somebody from the outside help building the systems that's necessary to be successful.
Yeah, I think one of the things you mentioned is very important, which is having clearly defined roles. And I think that's where a lot of teams have struggled. That's what I've seen is that it's maybe just like a group of agents, maybe like you said, three or five or even like 10 or even more than that. And there's just a bunch of individuals, right? They're just a bunch of agents kind of running their own business, but splitting commissions with each other. So having clearly defined roles, would you say that's maybe one of the more important things to have to maybe make sure that you're just not like a team of 10 or 5 or 20 dysfunctional individual agents?
Yeah. Yeah, because your own dysfunction only gets amplified by your team's dysfunction. Yeah. So the way I approach it, right, is getting people clear on what are their goals. What are we trying to do here, right? Are we just trying to get together because we don't want to compete against each other, we want to come, or do we have a lofty goal of certain production numbers or freedom, whatever it is? Why are we doing it? And I'm sure if you go and ask some of the teams that you work with, they may not be very clear about the why. They're just like, well, it sounded like a good idea, right? So spending time on actually getting behind or get clear on the why. Why are we doing this? What's the vision? What are we building here? What are our goals for this next year, right? What are the big initiatives and so on, right? So it's not just production. Getting clear on that, that's super big. That's super huge. And then start unraveling, because when a team forms, right, you go through these phases of forming and then there's storming where stuff is breaking and then there's like norming and performing and so on. Also being able to work through those personality challenges early enough on so it doesn't create a breakdown of the team structure, right? And then even having regular meetings, right? I'm not sure a lot of brokers or agents they're out there running around. They never even sit down and have planning meetings to figure out what they're working on, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, one of the things that I really kind of want to get your take on is if somebody was out there, because there's a lot of agents who do run teams that are more or less dysfunctional, right? They kind of just not really sure what they've gotten themselves into, and then they maybe have built up a team of 5 agents, and it's more work for them now than it was even before. So if you run into a situation where it's like that, what would you tell them? Like, what are some of the things that they need to start fixing right away in order to start at least moving in the right direction?
Yeah, I mean it's answer the why. Why did we do this, right? Why are we here? Number two, what are we trying to achieve? Is it production numbers? Is it, you know, splitting up the schedule? Is it sharing resources? Why are we doing it, right? So the what and the why, those are the first two things, right? And getting clear on what everybody's strengths are so that maybe one person is really good at managing the schedules and stuff like that versus somebody else is like I love going to social events. Well, let's put people into to work within their strengths so that we're sharing resources, we're sharing strengths and so on, right? So we actually up while we're independent agents, we still act as we are a business that has a shared outcome goal, right? That's a little bit different because you don't have a boss, right? Typically you don't have a boss, so it's a little bit different than a typical entrepreneurial company. But it also makes it interesting because people tend to have a lot of good ways of providing input, but can also create a lot of challenges and conflict if you don't know how to navigate all this stuff. And there was this one team, these three people I was just talking about, when they hired a TC, they were all like demanding instant answers at the same time from this person. And she was like, oh my God, I don't know what to do. It was a huge crisis initially. And we all sat down and we became very clear on what was important, what wasn't important, what can wait, what can't wait. And now it's much more harmonious, right? So,
Yeah, and that happens all the time. I think for real estate agents, that's maybe the biggest challenge is growing a team and building a team to make sure that people are engaged. Like you said, they're coming together in a weekly meeting. Everybody's on the same page because everybody is an independent contractor. So it's hard sometimes to motivate people, right, to do the things that they need to do. It's almost difficult to kind of wrangle all of your team together all of the time. So, is there something that you would recommend, right? So, one of the things that we've heard a lot of is, setting the expectations up front, right? Making sure the onboarding is correct, and then if you set the right expectations, things could move more smoothly later on. So, as an independent contractor group, do you have any advice for, agents who are maybe in a leadership position that is having a lot of trouble, kind of getting everybody together on the same page, sharing the same mindset and the goals.
Yeah. Yeah, so the interesting thing about leadership is one of these roles we can actually take on, even though if we're not somebody's boss, right? In a
Mhm.
typical organization, there's a management level. That's management. Leadership is a little bit different, right? And people tend to rally around a strong leader who can help people see a future, see a vision for something else, right? So it may just be necessary, especially if somebody feels like they have a natural tenet or natural skill of leadership and so on, that they just start taking charge, not in a I'm going to tell you what to do, but start bringing people together. And it takes, I mean, you know, it took me a long time to develop my coaching skills and my mentoring skills because it's a lot about listening and understanding what's going on and so on, right? So if somebody wants to be in that position and want to manage and lead a team, you got to probably study some leadership skills. You got to maybe take some courses. You may just need to understand the soft side of partnering with people, not just the number of dollars and cents about selling real estate, right? And so that's really important, I think.
Yeah, and it's one of the harder skills to develop for a lot of people, right? And you mentioned like, being a coach, being a business advisor, it's almost in a similar position, right? Where you're leading your clients, right? You're leading your students. So that's something that you actually developed yourself, and now you're coaching other people to kind of take up that position as well. So it's one of the harder things I would say for people to develop because it's not like you said, it's not like a hard skill. It's something that you kind of have to figure out, and it also depends on who is in your circle, right? Who is the different personalities that you have to work with and lead on a day-to-day basis.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, it's not easy, right? And also, does the rest of the team members, do they accept you stepping into that role, right? Do they are they going to follow you, right? And that's also some discussions that need to be had up front. It's like, okay, I'm not going to sell as many houses, but I'm gonna be running the operations and so on, right? And sometimes it's a freeing thing too for people. It's like, oh, thank God, I just want to sell houses. It's great that you're back here helping with some of these other areas that I don't want to do, right? Now, if you have two strong personalities and there's conflict, that can become a huge problem. And it's either not the right team for them, or they have to like figure out their disagreements and solve those.
Yeah, exactly. It does depend a lot on, who's the person stepping up and whether or not the agents around them are willing to listen right from the bat. So that's very
Absolutely.
important. Something you mentioned earlier that I really want to kind of circle back on is, you mentioned one of the things you help people on is also setting boundaries. And I do feel like, agents are probably the worst at setting boundaries because, like you said, they're always on the phone. They're never taking vacations. And if they are taking vacations, are still on the phone, right? At the beach, at the resorts and everything. And then as you step into a team leader's position, if you're running a business now, it's almost like that has amplified, right? That has increased because you're taking calls from, your clients, but also you're helping put out all the fires for all of your agents as well. So, what are some of your best advice, best tips for setting boundaries, especially for somebody who maybe have always struggled with that and they need to make that shift and start doing something the right way?
Yeah, it's the longer you let it slip, the harder it is, right? And the interesting thing here is it's about training not only yourself, but also training your agents, your clients, right? And so on, right? So, if you get a client that say, hey, I want to buy a house, it's like, okay, great. I work from, you know, 10 to 7 every day and Saturday mornings. Outside of those times, I don't show houses, I don't do whatever. You just tell them up front that that's your work hours. Then you already set that boundary. Now, if that client's like, well, I want to see a house on Sunday afternoon, it's like, well, I'm not the right agent for you, right? Or something to that effect. We can set that. Now that's difficult, and especially if we were, as we were rising up, being an agent, we would just do it, 24/7 pretty much. It's hard to start creating those boundaries, but the cost is going to be there, right? So you can set boundaries with, you internally look at what can I do to support myself, my clients, my family, my health, and all these things. And then you create those those you put those in and you start communicating it, right? There's one of those the people my clients that I work with. He's like, I don't answer my phone in the evenings and the weekends. I never text her in the evenings and weekends because he's told me that she doesn't want to hear. So I already learned that, right? I'm not her client. She's my client. I don't have something that's urgent on a Sunday, but still, we have this tendency that people will just test those boundaries, and if they start slipping, everything slips, right? And the same thing you have to do with if you're managing a group of people, same things like, hey, this is when I'm available, and start negotiating and working on those things, right? That's the best advice I have, is put your boundaries in place and train your people and your clients around them.
Yes, so that's exactly what you're doing. You're training the people that you're working with, right, to reach out to you at certain times and not reach out to you at certain times. Another part of that, I think, is, how they reach out or what are some of the issues that they reach out to you on, right? Because if you're stepping in a position where you're managing a group of people, you're really scaling up your business, you can't be the one putting out every single fire, right? Because you have staff members, employees, right, third-party vendors, people that can help with that. But a lot of times, people are, they just look to you as the leader, right? And then they just reach out to you for anything and everything. And you really have to put those boundaries in place instead of trying to solve every problem yourself.
Yeah. No, and it's so, if we think about a traditional business, let's say you start a small business, right? And you do it by yourself first. You're the visionary, you have a great idea to start a business, and then the business grows and you start hiring people. If you allow yourself to become indispensable in that business, you have a huge problem, right? Because as you said, every problem rolls up to you and you have to answer every problem. And it's not because your team is lazy, not because your team is not, I mean, maybe they're not trained enough, but it's probably not because they're lazy. It's just because you have trained them to become so dependent on you answering every little question and problem, right? And then, I mean, and as soon as you like step away for a minute, stuff just falls apart, right? So, good business owners when they start hiring, they start training, they start delegating, they start creating, standard operating procedures and says, hey, 95% or 99% of the things that you encounter should be addressed here. If there is the outlier, we'll talk about it. I'll help you. And then we add it to the process, right? Or something like that. Because it's the only way you can step out of it, right? I I have other clients where they're just so in it every single day. And it's like, oh, when I want to have a business where I can go to, spend the winters on the beach in Florida. It's like, yeah, but the way you operate, that's never going to happen, right? So just finding ways you can remove yourself from that critical path. You provide guidance, you provide leadership, you provide systems and processes. You're not there to be Google to answer every question that shows up, right?
Right. Right, exactly. And I feel like so many agents are feeling like that, especially in these days, right? And so many business owners in general, if they start hiring employees, they start, building out their core, their core support team. That's one of the biggest things that they struggle with because they know how to do everything, right? Because they've done it themselves. So when somebody else comes in and they're not yet trained, they're new, when they don't know how to do something, they come to you instead of you, helping them try to figure out how to do it themselves and making sure there's a system in place. A lot of times what happens, the biggest mistake I see people make is just they go in and they do the thing for them, right? They solve it for them and they don't learn and you're never going to be able to step out of your position either.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. I just wrote, so I write a kind of weekly newsletter to my mailing list. Right. I just wrote something to the effect that, hey, you created this, right? You created these problems that you're having. It's not your team. It is not the people. It's just because you have not trained the team, giving them authority, giving them that the ability to take care of stuff, right?
Yeah, 100%. It's all on you, right? You have to take ownership of it, and then if you don't take ownership, then definitely your team's not going to step up and do that and follow your lead if you don't do that yourself.
That's right.
So yeah, so Jens, I just want to say thank you for taking some time and joining us here today. I feel like it was a really valuable conversation for definitely a lot of people out there who are starting up their business in a position where they're trying to scale up, when they want to exit, when they want to become less significant, right? When they want their business to be less dependent on them. So for anybody who's out there, any agents or any business owners who's listening to this that want to reach out to you, that want to learn more about what you do and how you can help them, where are some of the best places for people to find you?
I'm old school, Kobe. It's just my personal website. It's Jens, JensNielsen.us, jensnielsen.us. My phone number, my email, link to a quick call with me is on there. So that's probably the easiest way. And I'm on LinkedIn and all the other places, but hey, go to my website. You can find me there.
Absolutely, man. We'll make sure to leave your website link in the description, the show notes down below. Makes it really easy for people to find you and reach out to you as well. So, Jens, just want to say thank you again for being on the show. Before we let you wrap up today, is there any last pieces of advice, any last tips or nuggets you just want to leave with us before we wrap up?
I just that we have a higher capability than we sometimes give ourselves credit to. I mean, we can do more than we think we can, and it's just like continue to do the work every single day, and things will change if you're willing to put the work in.
Absolutely. Thanks again, Jens, for being on the show. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you on the next show. Take care.